Hello, welcome to this webinar. My name is Anna Hunsinger, and I'm the Vice President of Community Engagement at Internet2. It's great to have all of you, and we really appreciate that you're joining us today. Internet2 operates in service of the community, and for us, it is super important to support our community's needs and what we can do to enable their collaboration, community building, and access to Internet2 and other national resources. A primary driver for Internet2 is to enable through collaboration and dialogue what no single institution can do alone, broadening the participation and benefits of what we offer to everyone in the broader US research and education community is very important to Internet2, and that's a key motivator for our session today. For many institutions that continue to provide access to post-secondary education for historically underserved communities, their paths in doing so have been anything but uniform. That is also true for how they support their faculty and researchers, particularly those whose work requires high-speed broadband, access to resources in the cloud, and high-performance computing capabilities. Many institutions are left trying to figure out how to move their campus IT planning past the enterprise infrastructure to be able to support science applications and distributed research projects, and to embrace new and unfamiliar territory that often requires upgrades to their campus level networking and improvements to their cyber infrastructure. Internet2 is truly honored to be working with colleagues from our membership and with the Minority Serving Cyber Infrastructure Consortium to help address these challenges. In support and in collaboration with this group, last year, we set in motion an effort to better understand how to expand cyber infrastructure to all in our community through a coordinated effort that puts the needs of minority serving institutions at the forefront of these discussions. Today's session will feature a panel of IT and research professionals, and through their voices, we will learn more about a survey that was done and how this data and feedback on campus IT infrastructure needs can help you in supporting your institution's research mission. Last but not least, I'm going to introduce our outstanding lineup of speakers. 4 questions, and to participate in today's Q&A, please submit your questions via the Q&A functionality or use the raise hand functionality if you would like to ask a live question. So our outstanding lineup of speakers. First, Dr. Damian Clark, Chief Information Officer at Alabama A&M University. Dr. Deborah Dent, Chief Information Officer at Jackson State University. Dr. Joel Kutcher-Gershenfeld, Professor at the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis University. Al Kouslikis, Senior Associate for Strategic Initiatives from the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. Joey Brand, Assistant Vice President for IT at Claflin University. Bobby Clark, Director, CCIT, IT Procurement and Vendor Management from Clemson University. Dr. Alex Feltes, Professor, Science College, also with the Department of Genetics and Biochemistry, also with the Center for Human Genetics, Biomedical Data Science and Informatics Program at Clemson University, the co-founder of Praxis AI LLC, and also an Internet2 Board of Trustees member. Dr. Urban Wiggins, Assistant Professor at the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. And last but not least, Lisa Wilson, Associate Vice President, Research and Sponsor Programs from Clark Atlanta University. Wow, what a panel. Thank you again for joining us, and let's get started. Deb and Damian.
Well, good morning or good afternoon. We're so excited to be here today. As Anna said, I'm Deborah Dent, and I'm the CIO at Jackson State University. And we've been given the honor of bringing you greetings. So Damian and I, we're going to tag team. First of all, on behalf of all of our co-PIs, which includes Damian Clark from Alabama A&M, and Joey Brin from Claflin University, Richard A. Lowe from Florida A&M, and Henry T. Jackson, better known as Tom Jackson, from North Carolina A&T, and a growing number of membership for the MSCC. We're excited today to be participating in this webinar, and we just so happy that you're here. So what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Damian, and he's going to talk about our background. Here's Damien.
Thank you, Deborah, and welcome everyone. So a little about our background. The consortium started as basically a conversation among HBCU CIOs and a cyber infrastructure team from Clemson. But it formally emerged from an NSF-funded pilot project that was awarded through Clemson called the CI Empower Grant. The grant funded site visits from the cyber professionals from Clemson, to include the previous CIO from Clemson, Mr. Jim Bottom. They went to a few HBCUs. They showed us how to create a cyber infrastructure plan, how to develop our specific cyber infrastructure from the perspective of research and computing. And the grant also funded 2 workshops, our initial stakeholder survey, which we did even before the pandemic. After our second workshop at Georgia Tech in June 2018, a working group of 20 attendees formed and created what we now call the Minority Serving Cyber Infrastructure Consortium. And we have a working charter document from this working group. An additional benefit from the initial CI Empower grant also resulted in 5 HBCUs, South Carolina State, Claflin University, North Carolina A&T, Jackson State, and now Alabama A&M, where we individually applied for this campus cyber infrastructure, popularly known as the CC Star grant, between 2018 and 2020. And all of us were able to receive those grants. I believe only one other HBCU received the CC Star grant before then. So team members from the Clemson team continue to be active members of the MSCC consortium, and we are very happy to have Internet2, who has been partnering with us and have funded the second stakeholder survey. Deb will talk about some of our main goals. You unmute, Deb. We need to hear you.
Okay, so the consortiums, we had 3 main goals that we're committed to, and that's increasing access to CI resources, enhancing interactions and effectiveness among researchers and CI professionals, and professional and career development. And with this, what our goal is that we want to enable minority serving institutions and organizations to accomplish what we can do together, what we could not do separately. So that is our main goal. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Damien again, and he's going to close us out with a little bit introduction about our vision.
Thank you, Deb. So to accomplish what we can do together, the things that we can't do alone, our vision statement states that we need to form transformational partnerships, among HBCUs, historically serving institutions, tribal colleges, and other designated minority serving institutions, so that we could collaborate with data, research, computing, teaching, curriculum development, and CI implementation. Within this consortium, we want to learn and grow together. We want to dedicate ourselves as participating institutions and other members to advance cyber infrastructure within our individual schools and together. And we want to engage as full contributors to the global research and education community. So now that we are done with the introduction, I want to pass it over to Joel to talk specifically about the stakeholder survey, the second stakeholder survey that we just did. Joel?
Thanks, Damien, and thanks, Deborah. First, I want to commend MSCC for beginning with a stakeholder survey, which told them that there was common interest sufficient to form a consortium. The second stakeholder survey was to say, where are the stakeholders at in order to move forward? And so I'm going to summarize just a couple of key findings from that. It was my privilege to work with MSCC in doing this. As you can see, we reached 291 different respondents from a mix of HBCUs, HSIs, TCUs, and other MSIs. And remarkably, we heard at least once, sometimes more than once, from 44 of the 101 HBCUs, from 63 of the 539 HSIs, and 32 of the 38 TCUs. The TCU survey was actually conducted in advance, and then we merged the two data sets since they were virtually identical. And you can see from the titles that it was a wide range of folks. This is meant to be the beginning of a discussion, not the final word, but let's go to the next slide. Overall, what came from the survey is folks said there are basic needs, the need for broadband to campus and other infrastructure support, and that before we get to advanced needs, a foundation is still not entirely there. Too many colleges and universities are on the wrong side of the digital divide. I'm just going to pick a couple of other things. Another key theme that we heard about, jumping to the third one, was workforce development, that folks on minority serving campuses want to build out the data and computing workforce for the future and want it to be a workforce that comes from these campuses and that then extends that work into society. Let's go on to the next slide. And also unambiguously, folks said they want to work together. We gave them a choice of, do you want to just work on infrastructure issues each separately, or is it more important to work together? And hands down, folks said it was important to work together. And lastly, social impact. What we heard, and of course in the pandemic, it's more true than ever, that there are racial and social disparities that have been revealed by the pandemic that raise fundamental challenges for which research, data, and computing is needed. And you'll hear folks talk about the expression, nothing about us without us, that the research on issues about our society and the challenges we face ought to come from the very folks who are in these campuses, and they ought to have the infrastructure to support it so that the research can address issues of concern to each community. Let's go on to the next slide. Those are high-level things. We did ask people, what's your must-have? And this is not all of the must-haves, but I just picked two to highlight. The very first thing was basic connectivity, security, access to technology. But right next to it was data storage, data management, and data analytics. So you're hearing both a need for the basics and the needs for very advanced infrastructure. Let's go to the next slide. We asked what were the barriers, and of course, time and money and staff are barriers, but also issues of data access, limited internet access, and there were other things as well, training with tribal colleges, the sovereignty of data, but there are a number of basic building blocks for which resources are needed. Let's go to the next slide. We asked a subset of respondents who were cyber professionals, do you have adequate data center capabilities? And I've highlighted in red, 62% said they did not, or that it was only barely adequate, not sufficient for research. We asked, how would you characterize identity management? And 82% said there was still work to be done. We asked, how would you characterize your computing infrastructure with respect to the cloud? And 73% basically said they're not living on the cloud, they have work to do. So clearly there's basic felt needs. Let's go on to the next slide. We had a series of questions about how data and computing might make a difference. And basically on every issue, a large percentage of folks said it was important or very important. And you can see I've highlighted in red the 4 areas that rank to the top, all with above 80% of folks saying it was important or very important. But notice that they also said these were difficult or very difficult to do. This was a scale from 0 to 10, and difficult was a response of 0, 1, 2, or 3. And so folks are saying that these are important but difficult to do. Let's go to the next slide. We asked about, well, how about all the elements of a cyber infrastructure? We couldn't ask about everything, but we picked a number of important themes: cybersecurity, attracting and retaining faculty, bringing in research funding, building a stronger movement, getting the relevant training, access to facilitators, design and operation, assessing things. Notice that every one of these was ranked higher even than the applications. And so essentially, these are all important, and you can't think of them as just a single point solution. You need to think of it as a suite that you address together. Notice as well that these were also seen as very difficult by folks. So there's a big sense of urgency and also a big awareness of just the fact that many of these will be a heavy lift. Let's go to the next slide. Finally, we did ask about collaboration. As you can see, all different permutations, HBCUs with HSIs, everyone sharing, MSI, majority serving institutions, HBCUs and TCUs, all were seen as important in comparison to little or no sharing. So there's a vote for collaboration, which is of course girds the importance of MSCC as a collaborative. Let's go on to the next slide. This is the very second to last slide. We asked people, what's your vision of success, or how would you use a phrase or metaphor to describe how things are going? We just picked a handful of responses here. Obviously, we heard from a couple hundred, but people are saying we need to be forward thinking. We need to see computing as it could be, not being resigned to how it is, that we should not leave any stakeholder behind. And of course, we need to attend to issues such as the sovereignty of tribal data. But all in all, people do have a shared vision of working together to accomplish, with respect to cyber infrastructure, what they can't do separately. Let's go to the next slide. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. It's been a privilege, and I really cherish the continued work with MSCC. What I want to really commend is the fact that they are building a consortium to advance cyber infrastructure informed by data. And you're about to now hear from folks who can then personalize the data with some of their own stories. I'll stop here.
So
the handoff is to Al, right?
Very good. Thanks, Joel. A great summary of that survey, which was very important. And just to start off, I'd like to emphasize that there are almost 700 MSIs in the country. In 2017, they represented 28% of the graduating class. So we're talking about a huge swath of the education enterprise in the country. And we need all MSIs to participate in the data revolution. They all need to be not just participating, but driving the applications that the data revolution is making possible. And so I'd like to just do a little summary of the work that we've done under NSF funding. We did a study of the CI, cyber infrastructure, existing infrastructure at tribal colleges and how it's being used to support their programs. And it was a 3-year study. We did site visits at 35 of the 37 tribal colleges. And we came up with some very important findings that I think are very consistent with the survey that Joel just summarized. Number one is that moving to CI, moving to data intensive programming is it's a campus community-wide enterprise, starting with the administrators. There's got to be CI strategic planning starting from the top, a mandate for the entire campus to participate in identifying priorities for CI infrastructure, the actual physical infrastructure, the networking, the data management capabilities, but also absolutely the academic programs. So the IT departments have a huge role to play here. The IT departments require strong staffing and up-to-date staffing, given that the technology is evolving so fast. They've got to keep up with their skill sets. So that's really important. Under academic programs, for students, data science should be incorporated across the curriculum. There isn't a department, there isn't a discipline where data science can't inform and support education and research. And not all tribal colleges, not all MSIs have the capability of developing that kind of curriculum across data science across the curriculum, which requires that there be partnerships across institutions, sharing that curriculum, sharing instructors. The emphasis on team science. Students early on in their academic careers need to experience team science, collaborative learning, collaborative problem solving, all skill sets that are absolutely required in this growing team science focused ecosystem. So for faculty, basically research capacity building, professional development, providing access to research computing resources, providing training, providing opportunities for collaboration. And that's the next high priority, if not highest priority, is building collaborations across MSIs and the larger higher education community. Collaborations on research, on development of solutions, of even commercializing solutions. Collaboration. It's what the data revolution is facilitating. So we need to take advantage of it. And finally, and maybe this is the most important, community engagement, finding applications of data science that address local needs and regional needs. And it should be our institutions that drive those solutions, not waiting around for the larger guns, the R1 institutions to do that work for us. So that's basically my summary, and I guess I'll hand it off to the next presenter. Thank you very much.
So my name is Bobby Clark, and thank you very much, Al, for that way of framing up those issues. Before we get into our panel discussion that we'll talk about in a minute, I did want to introduce Joey Brand to come in, talk about a couple of stories that he had about this particular issue with his particular institution, just to give us another way of looking at this whole problem from the student point of view. Joey, can you go ahead and tell your story?
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate it. I want to share with you a personal story about how Claflin University became interested in research and education, or Internet 2, which we didn't know anything about at the time. About 12 years ago, we had a gifted student who was accepted at a very prestigious Ivy League school, and word had spread across campus, and it was exciting. I happened to be walking in the science building, and I met the student in the hallway, and I congratulated him on his achievement. He responded with kind of a half-hearted reply saying thank you, and it was obvious he was not happy as I had expected him to be. So I asked him why he was not more excited. He stated that the school was not his first choice. His childhood dream had been to attend another very prestigious school, and they rejected him. He was still processing the idea of the childhood dream and had failed, that the childhood dream had failed, and he was visibly upset. So I asked him if they provided a reason, and he said that he lacked HPC experience, or high performance computing, and they didn't want to take the time to teach him. So the student's disappointment or reaction struck me deeply. Even though the Claflin University had done a good job preparing the student, we failed him because we were not up to date with an experience required to get into a graduate school of his choice. As the acting CIO, I resolved to never again have one of our students placed in this position. I didn't want to have that conversation anymore. And we started to explore Internet 2 and all that it has to offer. Now understand, we're a small 2,000 plus student university and located in South Carolina. And we wanted our students to have same experiences that you get at larger schools. So what we ended up doing was collaborating with Clemson University, and they sponsored us to get onto Internet 2. And today our students are getting that experience. We're getting more and more all the time, and we find more faculty are asking about additional resources that they're discovering on Internet 2. So the point is, if you're a small school like we are, don't rule out that you can't have Internet 2, or you can't do research, or you can't be part of the big team. There are lots of ways to participate and partner and have your students have the same experiences at the larger schools. And Claflin University's participation at mscc.org can be directly traced for us and for me personally back to this story that I just told. So thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Joey. And I want to emphasize a little bit of my background and why that story touches me as well, is because I grew up in Orangeburg, South Carolina, where both South Carolina State and Claflin are located. And I remember the kinds of things that both of those institutions did to make me the man that I am now. So I'm in a unique position where I've actually benefited from two HBCUs coming to me and making me the man I am. And now, of course, I've been at Clemson for more than 30 years and experienced what they have to offer as well. So it's having seen two sides of the coin. It's one of the reasons why I think Clemson's participation in this is so important, and why we must look at this as a problem that we can all solve together. And with that, I'd like to talk about our panelists. We have four panelists up. I'm going to ask each of them to give just a brief introduction to yourselves. There are four of them here. So I'm going to start with Lisa Wilson from Clark Atlanta. If you would just give a couple of minutes about your position and why this is important to you.
Oh, okay, thank you, Bobby. So I am Lisa Wilson, Associate Vice President of Research and Sponsored Programs at Clark Atlanta University. And I believe, Bobby, I am the newest member of this extraordinary team, having just joined last month. And boy, it's been great. I am honored to be a part of this team. I'm excited about what the consortium is offering our MSI communities. And I'm excited primarily because the goals of the consortium so closely align with mine as the head of the research enterprise. You see, as VPR, I see myself as the lobbyist, the advocate for our researchers at CAU. I fight for what they tell me they need. I work to empower them, sometimes to the point where, I have people pulling their hair out. But as such, leveling the playing field is in my DNA, and that's what this organization is trying to do. And I want to do whatever I can to advance the agenda of the consortium. And I invite all of our participants that are listening to consider joining the consortium as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We really appreciate it. And we're very happy to have you as part of our team. I'd like to move on to Alex, if you would. Alex is a colleague of mine at Clemson, but has a longer resume that I'm sure he'll tell us about. If you would just give us a few minutes of your position and why this is important to you as well.
Yes, so I guess so. I'm a professor, but I'm really a biologist, and I get excited about biology things and trying to understand why traits happen. What are the molecular mechanisms of that? That's really why I exist, I think, on this planet, is to figure this kind of stuff out. But I've found that the way to figure stuff out is not me doing it, but it's training students and working with other colleagues to solve problems that are really important for our species. And we solve problems in the biomedical and agricultural domains. So I'm really trying to take my experience. I've been doing this for like 25 years or something like that, and be able to have students learn workforce skills, things they can get jobs with, but also solve problems in the biotech sectors where I get focused on. So I'm trying to do that outside of my lab through collaborations and scaling up training, really for getting that workforce development skills out there in students, because I'm a little, as I grow older, I'm a little weary of just learning for the sake of learning, which is an important function of higher education. But I think we need to get a little closer to actual applications, applied skills to solve problems and get jobs. I think it's really important. I'm focused on that.
Thank you, Alex. That's really important. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about some of those issues and how you might have addressed them as a part of our panel discussion. Then I'd like to choose one of our CIOs. We have many on the call, but one that in particular that's going to serve on the panel, and that's Deborah. Deborah, would you mind just giving a quick introduction? Again, you introduced yourself before, but maybe talk about why this CI is important to you and your institution.
Okay. Hello again. As he said, I'm Deborah Dent. I'm the CIO at Jackson State University, which is an R2 research university. I've been at Jackson State now for about 8 years, but prior to that, I come to Jackson State from a research laboratory for the Corps of Engineers. So I came from an environment that we did research and resources were not an issue. We had the infrastructure that we needed, and then we always had the people resources that we needed. So when I got to Jackson State, I got here and I says, okay, sometimes you go to a place and you think you're going to have the same resources. And I know that some of those resources were missing. And I had a conversation with the dean, and there was a NSF grant that he wanted to apply for. And we said, okay, it was a CC Star. And then we found out that there was so much that we couldn't do because you had to have already been doing everything before you could apply. And so because we were able to get involved with the Clemson Power, empowering us and working with us, and we got our CI plan together, we were able to apply for that same grant, and we were funded, and we've been moving forward since then. So our goal is that we can empower our students. We want them to be well equipped, but we want them, as a CIO, we want to make sure that we have all of the infrastructure and the resources that our researchers need to be successful.
Thank you, Deb. To know that you have a very interesting background, and I know it's for you to share that with our viewers. So, and then last but not least, I have Dr. Urban Wiggins, who is going to give us the viewpoint of a faculty member and how CI resources are important to his goals and over in his institution. Urban, would you go ahead and just quickly introduce yourself and give what you've experienced?
Hello, my name is Dr. Urban Wiggins. I'm at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, an R2 institution, fairly small like Claflin. We have approximately a little more than 2,000 students at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. My background is a little different in several aspects because I spent almost a decade working in industry as a network engineer, and then I went on to work to deal with big data with institutional research at several other institutions. One was and those were small HBCUs. My educational background is that I graduated from Southern University, the Southern University and A&M College, from my other HBCUs on the line. And I actually received my doctorate from LSU. So that was a stark difference, going from an HBCU to the flagship institution of the state, where resources, again, as Deborah has expressed, resources were not a problem. So when I did that transition, I saw, oh, this is what they can do. This is how things are. And now that I am at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore as a faculty member, I understand why HBCUs are in the position that they're in, but I also know from experience how things can also be, because I have lived it. And now as a faculty member, my goal is to, as Joel stated, as Deborah stated, I want my students to have the benefits and the resources and the opportunities that I know that they can become, they can grow with, and they can actually take forth and show their capabilities. Being at a small institution, we used to have Title IX, Title III funding, where we were able to purchase equipment, but our IT department lacked, I think the term my director used was expertise to build out a science DMZ to the specifications for our cybersecurity program. So we have about $250,000 worth of lead weight because we didn't have the infrastructure in place to actually utilize the equipment. So this is part of the reason I'm a member. My administration, yes, Wiggins, keep going, because where we can't do it by ourselves because we have an IT team of 5 people and we need the assistance. We grow better, we're stronger together. So that is one of the biggest reasons I am here today.
And Urban, thank you very much. And all the stories illustrate the kind of problems that each of the institutions face. Some of them are a little bit different, some of them have different nuances. But I think the answer to that is not just that we have an answer to all those problems, is that we build a trust community that allows us to have these kinds of conversations and discuss the kinds of solutions that have already been done by many institutions so that we can share that with a community that serve minority serving clients. Before we start our first question, I want to do Joel the honor of giving him just a little bit of time to introduce himself, because he will be sort of the 5th member of the panel, maybe coming in and answering a question or two that's on the survey itself. So Joel, if you want to take a minute or two just to say where you're from and how you were a part of this experience.
This is Joey, not Joel, right?
Joel, yes, Joel, sorry. Joel, we're asking you.
They're asking you, Joel, not me.
Oh, you're me.
Yes,
I'm
just to
sorry.
give
Yeah, Joel. So Joel Kutcher-Gershenfeld. I'm a professor at Brandeis University. I'm still moved by Joey's story, and so, but yeah, I'm happy to periodically link the conversation back to the data and the stakeholder mapping. The work that I do is around helping to form and sustain multi-stakeholder consortia with data, and that's exactly, of course, what's happening here. Sorry about that. Delighted.
That's okay. We all are affected by Joey's story because it hits the heart of why we are doing this whole thing. So we have a number of questions, and obviously we want to get some questions in from you as the audience. But I'd like to take the first question and I'm actually, Lisa knows I'm going to come to her on this first, but just to talk about some of the obstacles that institutions are facing when they're having to do and use the right tools to support research. What strategies can we use together to overcome some of those obstacles? And Lisa, I'll go to you first.
All right, thanks, Bobby, for the question. So if we reflect back on what we saw in the slides earlier, what some of the must-haves were and what some of the barriers were: time, money, personnel, data access, limited access in some cases. I have had the opportunity to roll out our Internet 2 network since 2019. I joined Clark in about late 2017. So about 2019, met with the dean and said, hey, if we're going to grow this research enterprise, we really need to have access to the Internet 2 network. And so we met with the CIO, and around late summer we had an I2 network. So the strategies I'm going to share with you really stem from the lessons we learned in trying to roll that out and get our researchers access to national resources. We made a few mistakes, so let me share with you just a few, and then you'll understand where the lessons learned and the strategies come from. Well, we rolled it out. We thought we'd done a great thing, but we didn't advertise to the entire campus that we now have, independent of the enterprise network, an I2 network. We didn't advertise what it does, what the values are, what resources are accessible from it, how to use it, anything like that. We made an assumption that our researchers knew this already. So some knew and some didn't know. And for those who did know that we had an I2 network, they didn't know how to sign on. We didn't have a single sign-on. They didn't know how to access the network. Our cyber physical systems network that our researchers use and our cyber physical systems students use is also independent of our research enterprise, our business enterprise network. And so they weren't using it. And it wasn't until about a year that I went to do a survey to see what uses was that I found out they weren't using it. So I did a survey of our researchers and asked why. And then they said, well, you know what? Not only do we really not know what it is or how to use it or the value, we need training on how to use it. So some did, some didn't. So here are the strategies I'm suggesting for VPRs. First, I think you need to be very prescriptive in your approach to building a robust cyber infrastructure network. I would say marry your CIO, because he is your way to getting this done. Okay, I'm like this with Charles Cooper, our CIO. And second, you have to identify the science drivers. What type of research is going on that requires access to, and you have to know your researchers and what they're doing. So I did a survey of our researchers and asked, what are the science drivers? What are you guys doing? And what do you need as a result? But I only did the STEM researchers. So now, I'm saying add to your strategy, be inclusive. Don't just include STEM. You've got to look across all the disciplines, from the humanities to the AI guys, to the data management guys, to the human research researchers. Now, I have found that when it comes to funding or just building awareness about our needs, talking to my state and federal elected officials has become a real benefit. So I would say, as you build out your plan, consider bringing in those elected officials and tell them what you need, because they are going to the feds or the states and they're advocating for additional funding. A lot of the funding that we advocated for came down in the stimulus package. I'd say be aggressive in your search for public and private partners. When we rolled this out the first time, we had everything. Now we have single sign-on. We were grossly understaffed. and we had not gotten our stimulus funding yet. So we reached out to some local large businesses, and after the COVID thing, a lot of businesses in the city of Atlanta came to us and said, we want to help. So we wrote proposals asking them to help us build capacity in our CIO office just so they could support now our remote access for our students and our remote access for online instruction and for our researchers. And in terms of finding funding, additionally, I have been asking our researchers to make sure they include in their proposals that we have an I2 network and what it means, what access to cloud and HPC and supercomputer resources really means, and talk about those partnerships. And last, I'll say, leverage your funding. We got stimulus funding back in May. We got another round of supplemental funding in January. There's another round coming. If you read those terms and conditions carefully, there are guidelines that allow you to help build your infrastructure, so read those carefully. One more thing, in the AU Center, there are 5 HBCUs. And we have been collaborating for the better part of 100 years. We haven't been able to stay in the AU Center all this time without integrating and leveraging our resources. So this consortium is doing exactly that, and I encourage you again to participate. So those are my strategies from a VPR perspective.
Lisa, those are wonderful ideas. And so thank you very much for sharing those. One of those that I think, Alex, you can pick up on is the fact that you have to target researchers that are not normally STEM researchers, which I guess you're falling into. So can you speak a little bit to some of the points that Lisa brought and maybe add your perspective on what you're doing as a non-STEM researcher?
Well, so yeah, I guess, so identifying faculty is a difficult thing. So that need these, first of all, everybody needs this. And a lot of people don't know they need this. It grows outside, like you're saying, outside of STEM, because data is huge and everybody's got to be able to process their data in the cloud eventually. The days of the campus cluster are dying. We have to be able to scale out. Identifying researchers, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make, because I go to a lot of these kind of things, and IT people trying to find researchers and everything, is they're looking for the researchers, the PIs, the faculty members. You need to get to the graduate student level, or the undergraduate level. If they're having hackathons, or if they're getting together trying to learn how to code in Python or something, if you have workshops or anything like that, and talk to the students and then find out what faculty they're associated with and get to the faculty that way. Because most faculty are just like set in their ways and have bad habits that they're never going to change. One of the biggest thing I noticed from moving data around is that if it takes less than a week, it's okay. If it takes more than a week, maybe reach out to IT, when it could take minutes if you use the right network. But nobody knows that until they actually do it. So, finding somebody and then showing them how to make their life easier will actually get them to come out of their shell and their bad habit space. But again, the most important thing is, I think this is what this is all about, is everybody needs this computing. Everybody needs research computing. It's just absolutely pervasive through everything. It's critical.
Alex, and I think you're absolutely right. Data science needs to be a tool that we use in every field. And I think emphasizing that will find the opportunities that you want to find. And we found that at Clemson, and I think the people who were successful do the same thing. So Deb, I know that Lisa talked about marrying the CIO, and I know she didn't mean that quite literally, but she talked about maybe a strong partnership with IT on their institution. Can you speak to some of the things that happened at Jackson State that made you successful at what you do?
Okay. I'm not going to marry my VP. If he's on here, VP for research, sorry, I'm not going to marry you. Okay. But anyway, just being able to talk to the researchers, to find out exactly what they need. A lot of times IT is guilty of, we will go out and we will say, okay, we'll see these things that we wanted to do, and then we will just present it to the campus, and we'll be like the Gestapo, and we'll say, this is what we have and this is what you're going to use. But we have to talk to them and talk to our researchers and talk to our employees and find out, what do you need? And so that's what we're doing. We're talking to them and we're finding out, what do you need? I often tell the story when I first got to Jackson State and I talked to my team and they said, we can go anywhere on this campus, but we can't go in CSET. And I'm going, we can't go in CSET, science and engineering? And they said, no, they don't allow us in there. And that's because of just the business processes. But we broke that barrier down and we now work with them. Our goal is to have our enterprise IT be able to support our researchers so that they can spend their time on doing the research. And so when they're applying for grants, they don't have to put in partial, their funding will be for the infrastructure or something like that. We enterprise IT should provide that for them. And then there was something else you said, Lisa, that was so key that it went off and I said, oh my gosh. You said they didn't know about internet too. Okay. So we often just assume everybody on campus knows about internet too. Some researchers do. And we were on a town hall maybe about a month ago and somebody put it in the chat, what's internet too? I never fell out. I was like, oh my God. So we've missed the boat there. So as we're listening here, and you can see how the consortium is already working together here. We need to go back and do what you said and go back and re-advertise internet too. So you can see we're even tag teaming off of this. And so this is why we see the consortium is so important, that we can gain from each other and then we can go back and work with our researchers. I kind of went
That's
off.
great. That's great, Deborah. I also thought that was an important thing to want to be careful of, is that we have to let people know these resources exist. And so yeah. I do see a question that's coming from the audience, and it's from Tamara. What I would like to do, since it talks about the gap between offering higher performance computing in your organizations, is Urban, would you mind mentioning that while also talking to maybe some of the barriers that Lisa mentioned before? I'll give you a chance to answer that question more directly and see if we can't get that answer for Tamara. What do you say to people when they ask you about the gaps between high performance computing in your organization?
From our perspective, dealing with that gap, because that is a huge one in computer science. I have students who would like access, who don't. So what we've done is we have partnered with other institutions and other projects. So for example, one that we're using right now is partnering with Exceed to reach out to allow our students to have access to that. It's a goal that we are trying to build out, but and I'm working right now with our CIO, because we're part of University of Maryland Eastern Shore is part of a system, and the University of Maryland College Park, our main institution or our larger institution, actually has a cluster, and we're right now partnering with them to establishing the relationship with them between departments, because to allow our students to gain access. So that's what we've had to do. We actually had to go out and ask and determine who should we talk to, who is the gatekeeper, and what type of provisions do we need to be able to work with them. And the thing that's caught us on our side is that our connectivity infrastructure from outside of the camp, from off the campus to the campus, is managed and mandated by the system. While on the campus, our infrastructure is handled by the institution itself. So we have areas where, okay, you can't go in this building, you have to go to this building on this floor, and you have to use these machines in this lab to be able to connect to, which is not always the most convenient, or it's not ideal to try and teach or establish a relationship as when I'm dealing with my students and trying to introduce them to a new concept or a new construct for them to be able to grow with and take on as they proceed on beyond the institution. So that's been a hurdle.
So in general, accessibility has been the issue for you, and convenient
Yes.
accessibility for all your people. Yeah, I
And you would
certainly see
think
that.
because we are part of a system, and that's when we had to learn. The system has overarching authority, and they have guidance, and they have some resources up to the campus. But on the campus infrastructure is managed by the campus. So all the bells and whistles that may be at the University of Maryland, College Park, when you come to my campus, we don't necessarily have this, we don't have the same resources.
Understood. Understood. So I know we have a number of questions here. I want to get to Jen's question that's talking about, and certainly she thanks us for the rich conversation about this, but she's also talking to you, Lisa, and maybe to others about how you advocated toward your state and federal representatives toward and how you received the money from the stimulus. Could you speak a little bit more detail to that for Jen? And I would like others to comment after Lisa, maybe if they want to round it out a little bit.
All right, so yes, I can. Thanks you, Bobby. So we are always inviting our locally elected officials to campus with the idea that we are going to share with them what HBCU needs across the entire campus, but of course I focus just on the research enterprise. So once they become familiar with your university and your needs, then they are more prepared to go back to their fellow legislators and advocate for what you're asking. So one example is we have the Congresswoman, the new U.S. Congresswoman Nikema Williams coming next month. And with her, we're going to share what Congressman Schumer is doing in his act, what Congressman Clyburn is doing and his bill. And we're going to talk about what HBCUs need in general. And we start that conversation and we develop these relationships. And then we start to ask for support, especially in times like these when, you know, they can go back and develop a stimulus bill or state appropriations. We do the same thing. It's fundraising, it's relationship building. Sometimes it takes a long time, but it does pay off in the end. So it is a part of our strategy to always meet with and get legislators to our campus. So they know who we are, what we do, and what our needs are, and we share with them how the playing field is not level and what they can do to help level that out. It's a lot easier these days, considering the fact that the new Vice President, Kamala Harris, comes from an HBCU. The road is smoother, the doors are more open, so I'm suggesting that we do that. Bobby, I missed the second part of the question.
Well, let me do this because we're running out of time a little bit. So what I'd like to do is pose this question to you, Lisa, and to the rest of the people, just to sort of wrap up, as we have a question from Mary, who is asking, do you have any tips on how to sell your institutions on the internet too, and their capabilities, own tips from your own experiences? So Lisa, if you would just give us a tip, and then I'll ask the rest of the panel to kind of fill us out until we,
Sure.
so we can.
You know, it's kind of straightforward at Clark. We have a governance process that requires that we develop a proposal and answer every single question, including what the ROI is. And at the end of that, we have to present the lessons learned. We have to talk about how far we're along in the project. We have to talk about what other functional areas are impacted by this. And so we pretty much develop a template. I do it by first going to my researchers and asking them for their science drivers. I then share how this solution is going to build capacity, build capabilities, grow the research enterprise, and I forecast what that might look like. And that helps sales. Mm-hmm.
That's a great tip. Thank you very much. Deb, give us a tip that you would have for selling Internet 2 and its capabilities to your campus.
Okay, one thing is we're going to have to inform them, and so what we're planning to do, we are going to do because of that question, is have some webinars because Zoom is so popular now. It's going to make it really easy for us to have some webinars. When I first got to Jackson State, Internet 2 did road shows, and they went around and they told everybody all about their capabilities. So we're going to have an in-house road show. And we're going to invite Internet 2 to come in. They don't even know I'm just going to throw this in. We're going to invite them to come in and help us. Put you on the spot.
I'm sure my Internet 2 colleagues are now just chomping at the bit knowing that that's going to happen. Yeah, so Alex, give us your tip on what it took to introduce Internet 2 capabilities at Clemson.
Well, so I'm on the board of Internet 2, full disclosure, but it's not about Internet 2. It's about the whole package. It's about the ecosystem, being able to take data and process it. Internet 2 is a very growing important component in moving big data sets around. Actually, you're not going to be able to do a lot of genomics work, biology work without something like an advanced network like Internet 2. It's not going to happen. But I think that's a problem, is like trying to sell the network. Like, most people don't care about the network unless it's broken, right? It's about getting enough storage, accessing data, being able to process, especially with human data, security, having IRB approvals for processing all this data. That's what the researcher cares about, is the whole package, not just the network. Network is a critical foundation for all of it. But I would even say, just since we're running out of time, if you don't have a good Wi-Fi network, well, who cares about Internet 2? You got to have a good Wi-Fi network to be able to access these advanced networks, or it won't happen.
Thanks, Alex. Urban, your tip for what you need to do. What would you want to do? What you have done?
UMES is actually integrated with Internet 2. I think we're some of the few HBCUs that are already working with it. One, it was done, as I said before, we are part of a system. So University of Maryland, as well as, so that has UMES set up. One of the things that I've been selling point regarding the campus in conversation is that you're right, it's in silos. So what's been done is, when I found out it was in silos, was to start having conversations at the faculty assembly regarding what availability is out there, and I was going to follow, Deb's position and invite Internet 2 to our faculty assembly meeting and have them on the agenda to introduce. And I found at another institution, one of the things that helps is, first you bring in Internet 2 to provide the foundation and paint the picture. And then, Ms. Deb, I just want to let you know that I was going to call you to come and help speak as a secondary, because when you have an example of what's going on at another institution, it simply solidifies what has already been discussed. So yeah, Damien, you too. But yes, Bobby, to answer that question, that has been my process especially when I'm introducing something new. Oh yeah, and thank you guys for volunteering.
So we're running low on time, so I do know that we could speak another 20-25 minutes on this, but I want to bring in Anna just to say a little bit about what we're doing and about Internet 2's growing commitment with MSCC. So, and then we're going to try to wrap up very quickly. So Anna, I give the floor to you.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, everybody. We're delighted of our collaboration and partnership. It is through this consortium and through your voices that now we have all these great opportunities. And as I said at the beginning, let's do together what we cannot do alone. And I thank all of you and all the panelists for your perspectives. I'm super excited about where we are now and where we can go with all of you and with the community. Thank you, Bobby, for such a great job, also helping with the Q&A. Thank you again to all the panelists, and thank you to the audience for joining us today. We will be, this webinar was recorded, so it will be available to any of you. Please reach out to us at Internet 2 or through my colleagues if you have any questions. And thank you. We thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everybody. We'll give you back your time. It's right at 2 o'clock, so we're ending on time. So thank you very much, and we hope to hear from you and talk to you more in the future.